And I want to ask something too about your own experience because I know you kind of started off and you've interned at a lot of these larger companies and then you kind of went and started working at startups. What was your thought process behind that? Because I know there's a lot of people listening are in, large corporate, almost, the safe positions, and then going to a startup can be something that's quite, it can seem quite risky and
Mm.
are things going to work out and all these kinds of things. I mean, what was your thought process in doing things like that? And I know, have you seen other people that have done stuff like that, and what was perhaps their process in doing stuff like that as well?
Yeah, in terms of like what kind of gives you kind of that emotional safety to kind of take a leap into the startup world. I mean, I got lucky because my first role in uni was with a
Yeah.
startup. It just kind of came from like a cold email, joined an ambassador program, ended up working for this startup. 2 months in, we got acquired by Airbnb and I lost my job. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Let's do it again. And join another startup. So I had these internships pretty early on. I think like when you're young, like I think particularly for people who are like spending a lot of time thinking about their careers and kind of like going the extra mile, doing side hustles, that sort of stuff, like you're already gonna be so far ahead of the pack in terms of your level of effort and care towards your career. In deciding, like, let's say you're working in a big company, and you're deciding, oh, do I go and join a startup? I mean, like for me, like I'd be thinking about what problems do I really care about? What are the most important problems I want to work on? Like what just really excites me? What would like, I would be on the weekends just having breakfast, like thinking about how cool this problem is. So if you're gonna join a startup, like don't just join it because like, oh, you think, oh, maybe it'll become big and I'll get a lot of money. I think, startups aren't easy. They can be hard. Sometimes the hours are good, sometimes the hours are long, very variant depending upon the startup. So I don't want to make a generalization there. But I'd be thinking about, yeah, like what are the problems you want to solve, and like who in the Australian landscape is actually solving those problems. So you can look at some of like the top venture capital firms. So you look at like kind of your Blackbird, Airtree, SquarePeg, Folklore. Look at the companies that they're investing in, and then have a look at okay, what are those companies doing, and then find the ones in the problem spaces that you care about. That for me is like such a huge consideration. I think as well. So that, like that's kind of like yeah, probably like the impact side. Then there's more the learning side of like okay, going into a startup role maybe I'll make a big impact, really cool problem space. But then you've got the learning of like, okay, like what am I going to learn and how fast am I going to learn? So the velocity of learning and the type of learning. It's like, do you want to be cultivating technical skills? Do you want to be doing design stuff? Do you want to get like a very broad-based strategic approach? Is it like product management? Like being intentional about the sort of skills you want to pick up and like going, okay, if I join this environment, am I going to learn those things quickly? It's another kind of key consideration. So kind of you got learning, you got impact. And I think the final thing, and this is so important, is the camaraderie. It's like when you look at the team, you look at the culture, you look at the manager, are these people that you want to spend a lot of time with? Are these people that you want to be more like? Like if you're surrounded by those people day in, day out, you're going to become more like those people. And so I think if you're considering, leaving a big corporate to join a startup, like you should be joining, a great team, tackling a market that you really care about with a product that you think generally has a shot at solving the problem in a nuanced and differentiated way.
Yeah, that was really great, and those are some great questions to ask when you're going through this process, or even just thinking about it. Because I think asking the right questions in these situations is really really important in getting good answers, even for yourself. Like things like I've had guests on the podcast before. Trusting your gut in these decisions as well can be really really useful. Like if you're not being fulfilled in a company or the place you're at, you know that's your almost call to action to go and investigate these types of opportunities, I think.
For sure. It's so true. And it's actually something I really struggled with throughout uni was actually like on that point of like trusting gut, right? Like there were times where it's like I got a job offer and I would try to write down this really extensive pros and cons list of like, oh, like this is a good opportunity because XYZ, but it's a bad opportunity because XYZ. And like internally at like an emotional level, I think I knew like, oh, I don't really want this role. But I would get an opportunity like, oh, should I do it? And then go through this like ridiculous extensive analysis, talk to like 20 people, like analysis paralysis. I'm an overanalyzer by nature. But yeah, there is this fascinating lesson of like learning when to trust the gut. I think you should always go and collect data. So talk to people who are in positions that you want to be, more like. Go collect information and advice from a variety, but place higher weighting on the people who are doing the sort of things you're actually interested in and the positions you want to be in, and then you kind of come back to kind of like your values, what you really care about, gut feeling, and usually you'll have the right answer within.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I think that's really great as well. Like don't just trust your gut with no information. Like
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
definitely risky.
go and get the
Still
information.
collect that and still make an
E-
important choice.
Exactly. Like you might go and collect the
Mm.
information and then reject most of it. That might be the outcome. But you did the due diligence of collecting that information. And that's useful because we all have our own blind spots. We all have our own biases. We're all just dumb sometimes. So it's always good to get a second opinion. Like there's been so many
Mm.
decisions like where it's like my gut was like, oh, just go and do this. And I talk to people and like, what are you doing? I'm like, true, true. Had to think that one through a bit more. But yeah, no, get advice, but you don't have to listen to all of it.
Yeah, no, true. And